And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Originally started as a Kitimat cross-country ski club, the Snow Valley Nordic Ski Club has changed and grown a great deal since its inception back in 1976. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
Cross-country skiing has gained considerably in popularity over the past decade or so. As a result, there is an ever-increasing demand for the perfect ski spot, one with the right combination of rolling terrain and good snow conditions. Cross-country skiers in the Terrace Kitimat area have found what they believe is an ideal location for their favorite sport, and are impatient to get moving on building a 22-kilometer trail network in the Onion Lake area, about halfway between Terrace and Kitimat. About 2 years ago, the Kitimat Cross Country Ski Club approached the Ministry of Forests, asking for approval to develop the trails. For the most part, there were no strong objections to the idea, with the exception of the local trapping association. The proposed ski site would affect 4 trap lines in the area, so naturally the trappers became concerned about the impact such a development could have on their trapping interests. In the meantime, the ski club received the support of both Terrace and Kitimat City Councils, as well as the Kitimat-Stikine Regional District. Although not without much discussion, 2 regional district directors, both trappers, opposed the project. Director Les Watmo says trapping has existed in the area for some 50 years, long before forestry became a prime concern, and he feels the trappers must be considered.
That's an old established land use, and here comes a group in and says, well, we like this land, get out. And I certainly have a much clearer perception of what the Aboriginal rights are all about, because that's the way it happened to them when the Europeans come over. The Europeans said, this looks like good land, you people get out, move over.
And Watmo says concern for the trapper is not the only reason he voted against the motion to support the ski club's venture.
The regional district has a resolution on the books that basically says there will be nothing happen up there until there's a proper public forum on what is to happen up there, and that hasn't happened. And so the regional district now, and I brought this out at the meeting, the regional district has a motion on the books, and this new motion basically contradicts the one they have on the books.
The most vehement opposition to any development in the Onion Lake area comes from the trapper who will be most affected. The ski area would cover much of Colborne-Idie's trap line, and he says a large influx of people would ruin trapping in the area. Idie is also concerned that the construction of ski trails would have a negative impact on forestry values at Onion Lake. But when Skeena Journal asked Idie to voice his concerns, he declined, saying it's too late to do any good. Idie says the Forest Service doesn't respect trappers and will simply give the ski project the go-ahead no matter what they say. However, the president of the Northwest Trapping Association did agree to an interview. Although Otto Lindstrom has his concerns, he does agree that the Crown land in question should be available to all user groups.
We have to agree with the multiple use concept of the forest land, of the Crown land, and with that in mind, we can't really fight with the development. But if it is going to impact the trapper's income, part of his living, we feel that it certainly should be compensated for in some way by someone.
From the skiers' point of view, the 2 groups should be able to coexist. The skiers say they aren't trying to stop trapping, but that they too should be allowed to use the Onion Lake area. And they don't see any one group losing out if the present plan goes ahead.
They're concerned on the fact that we are cutting down trees in the forest, taking away some of the land base. Both of those directors are trappers, so they are voicing some of the concerns of the Trapping Association. And they did disagree with us on some possible impact on the on the fish. But from everything we can see and through the Federal Department of Fisheries, which is extremely difficult to, you don't put anything by them, I can't see how we're doing anything at all that impacts them.
But the trappers feel their rights are not being addressed, and although the two regional district directors who have trapping interests called on the rest of the board to reconsider its position, a majority of directors voted to give the project strong support.
Yes. We know that's a sensitive area for Lake Else Lake and for fish habitat at that end of the lake. We know that there's wildlife through there. We know that forestry has a concern just from a forest point of view, and the trees that are still there, although there has been logging extensively through that area. In fact, the skiers intend to use some of the old logging roads that are already there for their ski trails. So yeah, we try to look at kind of across the board and to see what might be the best use for that area for all the people of this region, and felt that it was a good project and we ought to encourage the project.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The Onion Lake facility has 32 kilometers of maintained cross-country ski trails, including 5 kilometers lighted trail for night skiing and 6-kilometer dog-friendly trail. There's also 3 warming huts, including a moose hut, which is available for ski-in overnight use by club members. Letters returned to the archives as they review a 1988 report from the Ministry of Forestry.
About a year ago, the ministry commissioned a consultant to put together a report outlining the trail layout and methods of construction. The report was circulated to Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Fisheries, and other groups with interest in the land, including the trappers. The Forest Ministry wasn't overly concerned about the impact such a development would have in the area, and the proposal fit in with the ministry's mandate to encourage integrated use of forest lands.
Our ministry's main concern in this particular case is that we minimize damage through trail construction and what have you. As you know, that area has been all reforested, and naturally we want to utilize the old roads and skid trails that are presently there.
Fish and Wildlife also had some concern, just the fact that it might have some impact on game and fur-bearing animals, but they don't see any major problem with the area. I guess Regional District had some concerns because they had some specific areas they wanted to develop. There was some concern of whether or not it might impact on the fisheries also as part of, because the Lake Else Lake is a very large salmon producer. But as long as this bridge was left out of the picture, there's no concern from anybody in that point.
It appears the only environmental concerns involved a creek crossing, so the plan was modified to avoid having any impact in the vicinity of the creek.
We ski on a meter of snow. We're not cutting any roads down that would cause any drainage into the creek, and all the other area is a gravel base, and to get extremely good drainage in the area, and we wouldn't be doing anything to have any effect on that at all.
The only real opposition to the report came from the trappers, who feel they should have been consulted sooner.
The consultant's report was a good report, but the unfortunate part of it was that he was never asked to identify other users or other interests in the area, and if he'd been asked to do that, those interests would have been already identified. The trappers would have been consulted before the plan came down, and we would have had some input into it. As it was, we got the plan, and we had input into it after the plan was done at a $10,000 cost, and of course the plan has never changed after it was done.
Although Watmo agrees that trappers should be open to the multiple-use concept, he says it won't work unless the plan is modified. One problem in appreciating the trapper's position is that many people do not clearly understand exactly what a trap line is or how it works. As Otto Lindstrom explained, a trap line is a block of land with natural boundaries like mountain ridges and rivers, or by railways and highways. The trapper has the right to trap that area and is responsible for maintaining a healthy animal population.
Anyone can use the area at any time, providing they do not interfere with the trapping. Again, to enlarge on that, by the Wildlife Act, anyone that interferes with a legally set trap is committing an offense.
The area Lindstrom traps is in the vicinity of Kitsim-Kalem Mountain near Terrace, and he has very few complaints about the cross-country skiers who use his trap line. But he adds the ski area is not as developed as the Onion Lake network would be, and he does recall one rather unpleasant encounter he had with a pair of skiers.
But we broke trail with a skidoo through some of the ski area to check traps, and we were bucking 2 feet of new snow, or pretty close to it. The skidoo's getting bogged down and fighting them out and building trail for them. So we broke the trail in and finished our checking of their traps, and we're beating our way out. And we're darned if we don't find a couple cross-country skiers. And of course they're towing a couple dogs along. And they haven't got the common decency to get off the trail, step off the side with their skis so that we can get back out without getting stuck or taking a chance on getting stuck.
This was the trail that you had made?
Made in an hour before. Now, if this is the situation you're up against on the trail.
Ski club members maintain that both sides would benefit from the development. The area was logged between 1965 and 1973, and consequently there are numerous skid trails and roads. Brown says 75% of the ski trails would be on those existing roads.
So that they would still maintain that access and probably even have more of an access in some respects. I believe they're quite concerned about trapping in that area if in fact we were skiing there. And I'd rather not say more than that on that point.
Brown suggests trapping could be done before skiing begins, but also admits skiing can start as early as the month of November. One way or the other, Brown wants to see it all ironed out before any development goes ahead.
And in fact, one of the trappers that has the largest area, who is a ski club member, is since taking some action to try and resolve this thing on a permanent basis, which really is if there has to be a resolution, we're not trying to hide this scale of the development we're doing, and we'd like to get it all resolved now so that when we get a couple hundred people out there skiing, we don't want anybody standing out there saying we shouldn't be there. We want that resolved now, so any development work, when it's time and it's going to be money in the long run that goes into it, that it's there on a permanent basis.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. What do hair transplants, blank CDs, and certain types of cheese have in common? They're all taxable. Preparing your annual tax return is a grind for most people. Let us return to the archives, highlighting the 1988 tax form changes.
1988 was the first year under a reformed tax system. Federal Finance Minister Michael Wilson announced changes last July, which helped most Canadians get a little bit more take-home pay. It's now time to see just how much more of our earnings remain in our pockets instead of going to Ottawa. Representatives from Revenue Canada were in Prince Rupert and Terrace recently to outline some of the changes to our 1988 income tax returns. The new form looks a little different, and along with it comes a new guide explaining all the changes. The key difference is the use of some new terminology and a different way to calculate what we used to call deductions. The tax return now refers to those deductions as non-refundable tax credits.
They represent amounts which were previously not refundable in the past, and that's the key point to remember here. It's just a change in where you're going to get the benefit of the deduction. You're going to get the benefit of the deduction against your federal tax before calculating your provincial tax. So what it does, it in essence reduces both federal, provincial tax and the individual surtax of 3%.
The changes, according to the Tax Department, are aimed at simplifying Canada's complex tax rules and to shift some of the government's revenue-generating methods away from personal income taxes.
To create a more fair system, what they've done is convert it to a non-refundable tax credit, and everyone gets the same amount of a tax credit irrespective of their income levels.
For those of us who are confused at tax time and are worried about the 1988 changes, Morgan offers a number of time and stress-saving tips.
What we suggest is, if you've got a pre-addressed form, make sure the information in the identification area is correct, such as address, date of birth, social insurance number. Make sure that information is correct. Then gather together all your forms, sit down and go through it line by line. When I say line by line, those lines that apply to you, look at the reference in the guide and attach the necessary information. One thing we find is that people in a rush to get their refund forget about a T5 slip, which is interest income, or they forget their official RRSP slip.
The result of all these changes, the so-called non-refundable tax credits, are supposed to yield more and perhaps bigger returns from the federal government. The majority of the 17 million Canadians who file income tax returns each year take the time to figure out returns on their own. And in 1987, 12 million people received refunds. Even though Revenue Canada says the tax returns are getting simpler each year, some of us in the Northwest still prefer to go the professional route.
I was just kind of looking through this, and it's totally different again, eh?
So you're going to take all your papers and send it off?
I'm going to have to, yeah, because I just can't figure it out. I always make mistakes, eh?
I haven't looked at the new forms yet. I've got them in the office, but I haven't had a chance to look at them.
So you take your stuff and you just hand it over to someone?
That's right, and hope for the best.
A few things have changed quite a bit.
Are you worried about your income tax this year?
I think so. I think I'll have to pay more.
And because of the changes?
Because of the changes, yes. I can't claim for my daughter this year, and she's still going to school, but she's over 18. And even my son, I'm allowed 388, then I got a family allowance of 3,856, so I'm losing 56 cents.
I'm one of these people that tends to leave it to the last few weeks, days. In fact, I was thinking about it this morning, and knowing these people were in town sort of jogged my memory and thought, okay, we'll start working on this now instead of leaving it to the last minute.
The last minute for filing tax returns is midnight, April 30th. There are penalties for missing the deadline, but the tax department says if we follow the guide step by step, the new changes should not make a major difference. We still will owe a chunk of our earnings to the government. Remember the old saying, there are two things in life that are certain, death and taxes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
A large, fully developed avalanche can weigh as much as 1 million tons, and it can travel faster than 320 kilometers per hour. In its final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to highlight the power of an avalanche.
On January 22nd, a wall of snow cascaded down this mountain east of the Salvis Highway Yard on the south side of the Skeena River. It's been described as a once-in-75-year avalanche. Normally, such slides go virtually unnoticed, but this one became airborne halfway down the mountain and slammed into this BC Hydro transmission tower. The tower, which carries the principal power supply to Prince Rupert and Port Edward, was buried under 5 meters of snow. 2 of its legs were sheared off by the force of the slide, while a third was partially severed. It now leaned at a 25-degree angle and was in a constant threat of toppling. Permanent repairs could not be made until spring, so Hydro decided to prop up the tower with 2 20-meter-high poles, hoping their new crutch would help the tower make it through the spring avalanche season.
As far as the procedure of setting the poles, it's pretty basic as far as the general line work goes, but because of the area that we're in, we're having to do extra loading with gravel to stabilize it and put some rock pins up the hill to add extra guying just to make sure that if there's any more slides this spring, hopefully we'll be able to save the structure that's there. Actually, it's amazing that the tower is still sitting where it is. There's 12 to 15 feet of snow around the footings itself, and it could have been just as easily slid down the hill and be laying in the Skeena River right now, so we're really surprised it's standing where it is.
The work can be described as precarious at best. Helicopters flying 1,300-kilogram buckets of gravel along with 1,200-kilogram wooden poles, while at the same time dodging power lines and the damaged tower.
I don't think there's anything more dangerous. Luckily, our job isn't like this every day, but as you can see, this tower could buckle, and if we hit this tower when we're bringing in the heavy loads like that, the tower could come down. Another good danger is going to when we go to take this tower down, because all these pieces of steel are loaded and they can just bang right out and knock people flying in cases like that. But it'll be something we have to cover when time comes.
Everyone associated with the repair is concerned about safety.
I think about it every day that we're out there, and mainly because the men are at such risk. If that tower falls down, they've got no place to go. There's a good possibility somebody could get hurt.
There's also the biting cold beating down on the crew from the helicopters. The north side of the mountain sees very little sunshine in the winter, so only a slight wind numbs you to the bone. The most delicate part of the operation is getting the poles and gravel in place between the overhead power lines. Meticulous flying skills are needed, along with constant communication with the crew below.
Once we got all the gravel flowing, then we'll just rip this board off, and there's a couple barrels in here that's about 8 feet deep, and that'll get the we can set the pole in there quite nicely. Tie her on up top, and that's it.
The recent cold spell delayed the repair work for 4 weeks. Prince Rupert customers were drawing record levels of power along the line, and backup generators would be pushed to the limit if the transmission line was cut. And it would have to be cut in order to work on the tower.
The problem lies is where we have to cut that line off, and we're running our turbines, which I think have a 50 megawatt limit. And if we're going to take an outage on the transmission line, we don't want to load the turbines to the limit. It's too much of a risk. If something faltered on one, then we've got a problem with our customers. We don't want to do that.
Several attempts were made to repair the tower, but either the weather would not cooperate or there would be a generating problem in Prince Rupert. As well, the Skeena Cellulose pulp mill would have to generate its own power because the Rupert generators could not meet the demand.
Okay, I'm not sure what about Skeena Cell's cost, but our cost can be anywhere for I would say a 12-hour period, anywhere from $18,000 to $36,000. Now that's dependent on whether we have natural gas. If we have to go on liquid fuel in our turbines, the costs are just about double.
Which is what you have to do now because of the shortage of natural gas for bulk users.
Well, we would have had to do that last week. Fortunately, today we're half and half. We got one unit on liquid fuel and one on natural gas, so it's not quite as expensive.
Avalanches are an expensive thing for BC Hydro.
They are, yeah, and they can be quite an inconvenience to our customers too if we have a problem like we've had here. And I just hope it doesn't happen that often.
While Highway 16 and the railway wind their way along the north side of the Skeena, BC Hydro decided to run their main transmission line along the south side of the river. Hydro has avoided many slide areas by placing their towers on some of the many islands and out of the reach of avalanches.
Transmission line was built in 1967. It's had very good service. I think we've had, during that period, 2 outages which extended beyond a day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.